This is the outer court at Kells Priory. That's the entrance, it's the main entrance, or at least one of them. The walls and the towers look defensive, but they're in fact not. They're simply not high enough. They're more likely to be is the prevention of theft rather than any sort of physical defence in the sense of somebody attacking them. More to stop thieves or 13th century burglars or 12th century burglars than anything else. There's a series of towers around it. 4 on the outer court and there's one directly behind me. This is the opening into the inner court here, or the wall of the inner court. The opening of the inner court. And this is the tower that was behind me. But whether this is a tower again or not is something that's open to interpretation. I shall continue inside. That's the tower I referenced a minute ago. This is the inner court now, or at least the area where that's the cloister there, the ambulatory, and the church. They're calling this the Prior's Tower, but like, that's open to interpretation as well. This appears to be an earlier building. This particular section of the establishment. It appears that it wasn't all built at the one time. There would be. This would be maybe 15. I would say 150 years earlier. While the tower would have been 13th century, 12th, 13th century, the other would be 11th. Some of them will say it would be just a question of size, that they simply didn't have the time to throw up something substantial when they came around first. This is an imposition, shall we say, a bit like shall we say, a fort in the middle of the prairies when they were fighting the Indians. That's in effect what this is. It's, in one sense, that's what it is. In another, it's a great bank where the product that it was holding was wool, and the transfers from here were down to the coast, then across to either Flanders, to Ypres or Bruges for weaving into cloth, and then from the cloth shifted down the Rhine or down through France and out at Genoa or Venice, and then shifted to the Holy Land. In effect, this was the other end of the line where the Crusades, the supply lines for the Crusades. They sold the cloth in the Middle East and basically got food in return. It's what kept them in the Middle East. So it's like many of these abbeys that it's situated close to a river. The King's River is at the other side of this on Kilree. Where I bring the dog every day, or the wood that I bring the dog most days, is one side of it is the Kilree, where I am maybe 10 miles away from that at the moment, much closer to where it joins the main river in this area. There's a slight graveyard on the side of it, but it was effectively defunct at the dissolution of the monasteries with Henry VIII. I think at the time there was only 5 monks, and there was something like 50,000 acres of land being held by this place. It was what the Henrician reforms did here in Ireland was to shift land ownership dramatically. The priors of these places would have been the brothers of the magnate, the local big shot. Here it would have been the butlers. He was one of the brothers of the butlers in general as they went on through the centuries. One of them would have been Archbishop of Cashel, and the other would have been the Earl of Ormond. Then another one would have been prior or prioress of a huge land holding. In effect, they were locking the thing in, but that was the design of the thing. It was the design of the takeover of Ireland by the Normans. It was just how they did it. Okay, I'll now move to the older establishment, the Celtic establishment that's close to here, more or less on the lands that this thing was built upon. This is an overview of the site. You can see why I say that it's not defensive. The walls there, would say, are easily scalable. There's arrow slots, but I think they're more for light than for anything else. They're not really. A determined attack would be removed. Wouldn't be removed, I should say, by them. You see where it's sitting in the valley. The river is directly behind that, between the buildings and that field of grain there, or field of corn. The town of Kells is behind that. Look at Jessie off on a hack on her own, deciding that it's time to go back to the car and dragging the thing with her. I'm now in Kilree. That's Slievenamon now in the distance. That's the mountain I climb. I'm about, what am I? Maybe 8 miles, 10 miles away from it, from the top of it. And as you can see, this is the landscape where this the round tower here is the highest point. I'm about 2 miles away from the last place that I was at. That's the base of the round tower. I see, can I get a bit more of it in? And that's it going up. You see, I'd say there's 4 yards of a diameter on it at that point. The door opening there is about, I suppose 2.5 feet by about 5 feet. But as you can see, that the inserts are that the stonework was put in as the building went up. So once you got to the top of it, when they put the conical top on it, that enclosed the whole thing. I believe that when they say bell tower, I don't think that bell tower is the correct definition for this thing at all. I think that it's far more likely that it operated in the same way as the mezzanine in the Islamic faith works, where it's a call to prayer, where there would be a guy up on the top of it, and he would see the sunrise and wake up the denizens of this monastic site. This would be not a Catholic in the sense of post the Great Schism. This would be earlier, and it would be considered, we'll say, what a monastic settlement in the Orthodox tradition, more on the lines of what you were talking about in Mount Athos, or even in St. Catherine's on the Sinai, or any of the other monastic sites on the Sinai. This would be in that tradition, not the tradition of the place that I was at before, the Priory at Kells. The Priory at Kells would be, for want of a better term, it's more an outpost. It would be perhaps be better to consider it more in militaristic terms, as distinct from religious terms. This is the churchyard, and this is the old church. They reckon this church is 11th century, but I think it's a bit newer than that. I think that there's probably aspects of it that early, but given the size, I suspect that we're talking 13th, perhaps even 14th century, and the build of it. It's just the substance that's attaching to it. It just seems a bit too big for it to be that early. I'll try and move and get a better view of the high cross. Now I've moved about 10 feet, well, moved about 4 feet. There's the high cross in the field. Now the high cross would be within the precinct of the monastic site. So we're talking from the tower to the high cross, if, and this is the big if the high cross is where it was put when they put it up. Now, of all the items here, they consider the high cross to be the oldest, and they're saying that's about between 8th, 9th century. The round tower, they're calling it 9th, 10th century, and the original cell of the church, they're calling it 10th, 11th century. So you're talking the spread of 500 years between the cross, the tower, and the church, or I would say the original cell of the church. And they're considering that there was a monastic site here from the 5th century onwards. How valid that is, it's open to question. They haven't really done much by way of excavations here, and particularly not excavations outside of this particular area that we're in at the moment, which would be the old churchyard, which would have been perhaps the delineations there, the walls that we're seeing. That wall running to the round tower is perhaps earliest, I'd say 18th century, but more than likely 19th century, about 1880 in all likelihood. But the precinct of this would stretch outside of the church, outside of the cross, in a great circle. So from where I am here in the churchyard, if you imagine to that cross, and then a great circle around, if I'm on one of the radii, shall we say. That's the general run of these places. Now there's ground markings. There's humps and bumps through the field there between me and the cross, and there's humps and bumps all the way around on the other side as well, which would indicate some sort of settlement. But the likelihood is that a lot of these could be pretty far down, and that it would take a substantial excavation to actually discover the origins of this place. Now, it's considered also in the earlier tradition. This is they call it Kilree, which is the king's place. So the chances are that this is an earlier tradition going back further than the 5th century, to a Celtic to the place where the Celtic kings of this particular part of Ireland. Back then, they called it Ossory, the southern kings, place of the southern kings, Ree being king. This is a better look at the tower. At least I think I can see a better look at the tower. Let me see, can we bring it down a bit? There we go. You can see that there's windows on the upper levels which are pointing, which seem to be pointing not to the cardinal points, but to the shall we say, the southeast, north, east, or sorry, yeah, southeast, northeast, northwest, and southwest, which we'll say would lend itself to the idea that it was part of the idea of the setting and rising suns. But the earlier tradition for the kings or the local magnate in this area, well, perhaps magnate is too strong. I think clan chief, like in Scotland, perhaps would be the best way of describing it, like the Campbells or the Stuarts or the other main guys, where they would have sub-septs or of that particular main group. They would be related to sisters who would marry into the other part of it. So that essentially, while the name might change, the actual bloodline would be pretty much the same between one and the other. It would just be a question of semantics at certain points. As you see, this is a fairly well populated graveyard. Let's see if we can bring this down a bit. We can see what's going on. Yes. No. When was the last one? This 62, 65, 71, 53. That seems to be. See, Barry's, that Barry, for instance, there would be De Barry, which would be a Norman name. This one here, it's Butler. I can't really see that one. And I bring the camera closer. This is Shorthall, definitely an English name. Phelan, again, kind of in that region. This would be the tenants of what would have been the old estate, attaching itself to the place, the Priory at Kells, and then subsequently they would be tenants of whoever came, the butlers, after the monastery was dissolved. Okay.